California's journey from a land of small native villages to a booming modern state is a fascinating story spanning thousands of years. Over time, California has seen the rise and fall of Spanish missions, the chaos of the gold rush, growth into an agricultural and industrial powerhouse, and the emergence of cultural and technological industries that influence the world today. In this script, we will explore California's history era by era, from its earliest peoples and colonization to statehood, 20th century transformations, and the diverse, dynamic California of today. The language is simple and clear so that everyone, kids and adults, including English learners, can enjoy and understand this story. Let's begin with the first Californians and then move through each major era, seeing how one leads to the next in the rich tapestry of California's past. California's story begins with its first peoples, diverse Native American tribes who inhabited the region for thousands of years before any European arrived. In fact, California was one of the most culturally and linguistically diverse areas in North America. Different tribes and nations lived in a variety of landscapes, from coastal shores to inland valleys and mountains. They developed rich cultures, each with its own languages, traditions, and knowledge of the land. Estimates suggest that by the time Europeans first sighted California in the 1500s, about 130,000 Native Americans lived in what is now California. These Native Californians managed the land wisely. For example, some practiced controlled burning of forests to help certain plants grow and to prevent larger wildfires. They hunted, fished, and gathered acorns and other wild foods, creating a sustainable life well adapted to California's environments. Rock art like petroglyphs, ancient carvings on stone, can still be seen in places such as the Coso Rock Art District in the Mojave Desert, offering a window into the spiritual and daily life of these first Californians. However, the peaceful world of the indigenous peoples would be forever changed once outsiders arrived. The first Europeans to see California were the Spanish, and their arrival in the 1500s brought drastic changes. Diseases unknown in the Americas swept through native communities, tragically causing many deaths. In the 19th century, violence and displacement further devastated the native population, a dark period sometimes called the California Genocide. But despite these hardships, California's Native American people survived. They have kept many of their traditions alive and continue to fight for their rights, languages, and heritage to this day. The story of California truly begins with them, a foundation of diverse cultures that set the stage for everything to come. In the mid-16th century, European explorers from Spain sailed into the Pacific, seeking new lands and wealth. In 1542, Spanish navigator Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo became the first European to sight the region that is present-day California. Cabrillo's expedition charted parts of the coast and encountered some native villages, but after his voyage, Spain largely ignored Alta California, Upper California, for over 2 centuries. Early reports described the area as too remote and poor in resources to bother colonizing. It wasn't until 1769 that Spain took serious action to settle California, spurred by fears that other Europeans, like the Russians or British, might seize the Pacific coast. In that year, Gaspar de Portola led a Spanish expedition overland from Mexico, and Father Junipero Serra, a Franciscan friar, established the first Spanish mission at San Diego in 1769. The Spanish era in California was defined by missions, presidios, and pueblos. The 21 Catholic missions, stretching from San Diego in the south to Sonoma in the north, were the centerpiece of Spain's colonization strategy. Each mission was a combination of church, farm, and village, aiming to convert Native Americans to Christianity and teach them Spanish ways of life. The padres, priests, taught farming, winemaking, carpentry, and other crafts to native peoples. But this was no idyllic cultural exchange. Native Californians were often forced to live and work at the missions, giving up their traditional lifestyle. Forced labor was common. The missions used native labor to till vast fields, tend cattle, and produce goods like hides, tallow, animal fat, olive oil, and wine. Disease and harsh conditions caused the native population around missions to plummet. By one estimate, the Mission Indian population in California declined from about 87,000 in 1800 to only around 14,000 by 1832. Alongside the missions, Spain established presidios, military forts, at strategic locations like San Diego, Santa Barbara, Monterey, and San Francisco to defend the territory. Small civilian towns called pueblos also grew, including one at Los Angeles, founded in 1781, and one at San Jose, founded in 1777. These pueblos were initially tiny, but they planted the seeds of the great cities those locations would one day become. By 1821, after about 52 years of mission life, the Spanish colonial period in California came to an end. In that year, Mexico won independence from Spain, and California became a province of the new Mexican Republic. The Spanish era left a complex legacy. Spanish names for many places, San Francisco, Santa Barbara, etc. The introduction of European agriculture, cattle, horses, crops like grapes and oranges, and a population of Californios, people of Spanish/Mexican descent born in California, who would soon become the leaders in the next chapter of California's history. Mexican rule brought big changes to California society. After 1821, Alta California was no longer a distant outpost of Spain, but a far northern province of Mexico, governed from Mexico City. One of the first things the Mexican authorities did was secularize the missions, that is, take them away from the church. The Mexican government, suspicious of the Spanish Franciscan priests' influence, passed laws in 1833 to 1834 to shut down the mission system. The mission's vast ranch land were divided up and granted to Mexican settlers and Californios, often politically well-connected families, in huge land grants called ranchos. These ranchos, devoted mainly to cattle ranching, became the center of California's economy in the Mexican era. The Padres departed, most returning to Mexico, and many Native Americans who had lived at the missions were left adrift. Some went to work on the ranchos, where they were often cruelly exploited as laborers, while others tried to return to traditional village life, but found their old lands taken. During the Mexican period, California was very sparsely populated and quite isolated. Communication with central Mexico was difficult, only occasional ships or arduous overland journeys. By 1845, the non-native population of Alta California was still only around 8,000 people, mostly Californios, people of Spanish/Mexican heritage. However, foreign influence was growing. Mexico allowed trade with other nations, so British and American ships began arriving to trade for hides and tallow, earning California the nickname the hide and tallow trade era. Some foreigners even settled. Small numbers of American, British, and other European immigrants arrived in the 1830s and 1840s. One such settler was John Sutter, a Swiss entrepreneur who in the 1840s established Sutter's Fort in the Sacramento Valley, little knowing that it would soon be at the heart of a global gold rush. Tensions eventually rose between the California authorities and the increasing presence of Americans. In 1846, as the United States and Mexico neared war, a group of American settlers in Sonoma staged the short-lived Bear Flag Revolt, declaring California an independent republic, with a crude flag featuring a grizzly bear. This insurgency was quickly overtaken by larger events. The Mexican-American War had begun. U.S. military forces moved into California by land and sea. By July 1846, U.S. Navy ships raised the American flag in Monterey and San Francisco, and by early 1847 the Californios had surrendered after some skirmishes, such as battles around Los Angeles. The war in California was relatively brief, and when the broader war ended with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in February 1848, Mexico formally ceded California to the United States. Mexican California had lasted only 27 years. It ended with California on the brink of an incredible transformation. For just 9 days before that treaty was signed, gold had been found in the Sierra Nevada foothills, triggering the event that would truly put California on the map. In January 1848, a discovery took place that changed California forever. A carpenter named James W. Marshall, working at a sawmill owned by John Sutter, found gold flakes in the American River at Coloma. News of this discovery spread like wildfire. At first, people nearby in California, many of them soldiers recently arrived during the war, rushed to the site. By August 1848, the hills and streams around Sutter's mill were filled with roughly 4,000 gold seekers, living in tents and crude shacks as they feverishly panned for gold. When President James K. Polk announced the California gold findings to the U.S. Congress in late 1848, the California gold rush was truly on. In 1849, tens of thousands of people poured into California from around the world. These gold seekers, nicknamed 49ers, came by every route imaginable. About half came by sea, sailing from East Coast ports around Cape Horn or via the disease-ridden shortcut across the Isthmus of Panama. The other half took the long overland trails, crossing deserts and mountains with great hardships to reach the Golden Land. By the end of 1849, nearly 80,000 newcomers had arrived, and by 1852, the non-native population of California had ballooned from around 14,000 before the rush to over 200,000 people. The gold rush was an era of excitement, chaos, and opportunity, though only a lucky few struck it rich. Miners typically worked long days panning or digging for gold in difficult conditions, and most found just enough gold to get by. Towns sprang up overnight near the diggings. San Francisco, a sleepy village of about 200 people in 1846, exploded into a boom town of 36,000 residents by 1852. Other mining towns like Sacramento, Stockton, and Placerville grew rapidly as well. Businesses boomed by selling supplies and services to miners at high prices. More fortunes were made by merchants than by miners. Importantly, the gold rush brought global diversity to California. California in the late 19th century grew from a rough frontier into a more settled state, though it was not without turmoil. After the gold rush, many fortune seekers left when the easy gold ran out, but a great number stayed and turned to other livelihoods. California's fertile farmland and mild climate drew people into agriculture. Crops like wheat, citrus fruits, grapes for wine, and vegetables thrived, and California soon became an agricultural powerhouse. The state's population continued to climb steadily, reaching about 380,000 by 1860 and 864,000 by 1880. One of the most significant developments of this era was the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869, which finally linked California directly to the rest of the United States by rail. This was a huge milestone. A week-long train ride replaced the months-long sea voyages or wagon treks. The railroad, built from the west by California's Central Pacific Railroad and from the east by the Union Pacific, met in Promontory, Utah, where the ceremonial Golden Spike was driven in 1869 to mark the nation's first coast-to-coast railway. The rail connection brought a fresh wave of migration to California. Now that travel was easier, thousands of Americans from the Midwest and East, farmers, entrepreneurs, laborers, and their families, moved to California in the 1870s and 1880s, fueling the growth of cities and towns. It wasn't just internal migration. Overseas immigration played a role too. During the gold rush, many Chinese immigrants had arrived to work the mines or build the railroads. By the 1870s, Chinese workers formed a crucial part of California's workforce, especially in railroad construction, agriculture, and urban services. However, they faced intense discrimination and resentment from some settlers. Economic downturns, like an 1870s depression, led to scapegoating of Chinese laborers, culminating in a strong anti-Chinese movement. This pressure resulted in the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, a federal law that banned further immigration of Chinese laborers. California had agitated strongly for this, reflecting the prejudice of the time. With fewer Chinese allowed in, some employers turned to workers from Japan, but Japanese immigrants, too, met hostility. A gentleman's agreement in 1907 between the U.S. and Japan halted most Japanese immigration as well. Politically, California in the late 1800s oscillated between different power centers. Wealthy railroad barons, like the Big Four, who ran the Central Pacific Railroad, wielded enormous influence over the state's economy and politics. There were labor movements, and even a new state constitution in 1879 that aimed to address some concerns. It included provisions limiting Chinese employment, unfortunately. Despite social tensions, California continued to prosper. San Francisco became a major city, a financial and cultural hub of the West, though it suffered a devastating blow with the 1906 earthquake and fire slightly after this period, an event we'll touch on in the next era. Los Angeles, which had been a relatively small town, just 11,000 people in 1880, began to boom in the 1880s and 1890s thanks to a land boom and the arrival of the railroad. Southern California's sunny climate and cheap land attracted settlers, kicking off LA's growth. By 1900, Los Angeles had over 100,000 residents, and California's total population was about 1.5 million, a far cry from the days of 8,000 Californios before the gold rush. The stage was set for California to enter the 20th century as a land of opportunity, growth, and innovation, but also a place grappling with the challenges of rapid expansion and a very diverse populace. The early decades of the 20th century saw California continue its meteoric rise, with new industries, social changes, and infrastructure projects transforming the state. By 1910, California's population had already jumped to about 2.4 million, a 60% increase from 1900. This growth was fueled by both migration from other states and countries and by California's own booming birth rate. The state's economy was diversifying. Beyond agriculture and mining, oil was discovered. The Los Angeles area experienced oil booms in the 1890s and 1920s, and manufacturing began to take root. Politically, California was at the forefront of the progressive era reforms. Under Governor Hiram Johnson, elected 1910, the state curbed the power of the Southern Pacific Railroad politically and introduced reforms like initiative, referendum, and recall to give citizens more direct control, changes that still define California politics. One of the most far-reaching developments of this era was the rise of Hollywood and the motion picture industry. In the 1910s, filmmakers flocked to Southern California to take advantage of the sunny climate and varied scenery ideal for shooting movies. By the 1920s, Hollywood, a district of Los Angeles, had become the film capital of the world, turning out silent films and, later, talkies that captivated global audiences. The films and glamorous movie stars of Hollywood brought California a new kind of fame. It became not just a place of farms and mines, but a land of entertainment and dreams. The idea of the California dream, in fact, grew in this period. Millions of people saw California as a place of opportunity, freedom, and fun. From 1900 to 2010, about 35 million people moved to California in search of a better life. This incredible migration was driven in no small part by California's image in popular culture, which Hollywood helped craft as a golden land of sunshine and opportunity. As cities expanded, major infrastructure projects reshaped the landscape. One was the construction of massive aqueducts to supply water to arid areas. Notably, the Los Angeles Aqueduct, completed in 1913 under engineer William Mulholland, which brought water from the Owens Valley to Los Angeles, enabling that city's explosive growth. In Northern California, the Hetch Hetchy Aqueduct, finished in the 1920s, brought Sierra Nevada water to the San Francisco Bay Area. Speaking of San Francisco, the city rebounded impressively after the 1906 earthquake, which destroyed much of the city by quake and fire. By the 1915 World's Fair, Panama, Pacific Exposition, San Francisco showcased its recovery and California's emerging status as a Pacific economic powerhouse. The 1920s were boom years. Agriculture, oil, and Hollywood propelled the economy. California's population surged again, reaching about 5.7 million by 1930. Automobiles became common, and California began building roads and highways to accommodate the car. Los Angeles, in particular, developed a car-centric layout early on. In 1937, an iconic landmark opened, the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, then the longest suspension bridge in the world, which symbolized California's engineering prowess and connected the San Francisco Peninsula with the Marin headlands across the Golden Gate Strait. By the end of the 1930s, California was firmly on the map as America's most modern state, but it also faced new trials. The Great Depression hit in 1929, and California was not spared. Economic hard times in the Midwest, the Dust Bowl drought, sent hundreds of thousands of refugees, often called Okies and Arkies, as many came from Oklahoma and Arkansas, to California in the 1930s, looking for farm work. This influx was poignantly depicted in John Steinbeck's novel, The Grapes of Wrath. Tensions sometimes flared as migrant workers struggled and labor movements, like farm worker strikes, began. Still, by 1940, California's population, about 6.9 million, and infrastructure had positioned it for an even larger role, one it would take on during World War II in the following decades. The outbreak of World War II in 1941, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, was a turning point for California, catapulting the state into a position of national importance like never before. Due to its West Coast location, California became a crucial center for the war effort against Japan in the Pacific. Enormous wartime industries sprang up. Shipyards in the Bay Area, such as Henry Kaiser's yards in Richmond, built Liberty ships at record pace. Airplane factories in Southern California, like Douglas Aircraft and Lockheed, turned Los Angeles into a hub of aerospace manufacturing. The war also brought the establishment of many military bases and training camps in California's ample open spaces. All this defense activity meant jobs. Lots of jobs, which drew yet more Americans from other states to California. From 1940 to 1950, over 3.5 million new residents were added, many of them people who came to work in war industries and decided to stay for the prosperous peace that followed. By 1950, the state's population exceeded 10.5 million, making California the second most populous state in the nation, and it was well on its way to surpassing New York, which it eventually did by 1962 to become number one. While the war brought economic boom, it also had painful aspects on the home front. After Pearl Harbor, about 120,000 Japanese Americans on the West Coast, most of them living in California, were forcibly removed from their homes and placed in internment camps inland under the U.S. government's Executive Order 9066. This violation of civil rights was driven by wartime fear and racism. Many Japanese American families lost their businesses, farms, and properties. Although decades later the U.S. formally apologized and offered reparations, the internment remains a dark chapter in California's World War II history. When the war ended in 1945, California entered a golden age of growth in the 1950s. The economy switched from wartime production to peacetime, but the momentum continued. Veterans who had trained or been stationed in California often decided to settle there, using GI Bill benefits to buy homes and attend California's expanding universities. Suburbs sprouted around all the major cities. Neat rows of tract homes and a now classic Southern California car-oriented lifestyle. California's highway system expanded rapidly. The late 1940s and 1950s saw the construction of the first freeways in Los Angeles, for example. Los Angeles in particular boomed, spreading outward in a vast metropolitan expanse of suburbs, shopping centers, and new industries. By the mid-1950s, Los Angeles had overtaken Philadelphia to become the third largest city in the U.S., behind New York and Chicago. Culturally, the post-war era cemented California's image as the embodiment of the American dream. The state was prosperous, its climate sunny, its lifestyle often portrayed as modern and carefree. In 1955, Disneyland opened in Anaheim, exemplifying California's blend of entertainment and innovation. Yet the state also faced challenges. Explosive growth meant traffic and smog. Los Angeles' notorious smog problem grew in the 1950s, prompting some of the nation's first air pollution controls. And not everyone shared equally in the good times. Racial segregation and discrimination persisted. Nevertheless, by the end of the 1950s, California was the most populous state, officially achieving that in 1962, and had the largest economy of any state. If California were a country, it would already have ranked among the world's top economies even then. It was clear that California would play a leading role in America's future, a role that would involve social upheavals and technological revolutions in the coming decades. The 1960s and 1970s in California were times of tremendous social change, activism, and cultural innovation, as well as the birth of the modern tech industry. By the 1960s, California was a trendsetter in many ways. It had a young, diverse population and was at the forefront of national issues. One major arena was the fight for civil rights and social justice. California, like the rest of the country, witnessed civil rights movements. For example, in 1963, African-American community leaders in the Bay Area led protests against housing discrimination, and in 1965, the Watts riots erupted in Los Angeles, sparked by racial tensions and policing issues. Activists like Cesar Chavez organized the United Farm Workers in California's Central Valley in the 1960s, leading great boycotts and marches to win better conditions for the mostly Mexican-American farm laborers. This was a significant movement highlighting the rights of Latino immigrants and workers, and it resonated worldwide. California was also the birthplace of much of the 1960s counterculture. In 1967, San Francisco's Summer of Love saw thousands of young people, nicknamed hippies, gather in the Haight-Ashbury district, embracing new ideas of peace, music, and alternative lifestyles. Iconic California musicians like the Beach Boys, celebrating the surf culture of L.A., Jefferson Airplane, and the Grateful Dead from San Francisco's psychedelic scene, defined the soundtrack of a generation. The state's universities became hotbeds of free speech and anti-war protest. Notably, the free speech movement began at UC Berkeley in 1964 when students demanded the right to political speech on campus. As the Vietnam War escalated, huge anti-war demonstrations took place in California's cities and campuses. In 1969, activists and Native American groups even occupied Alcatraz Island in the San Francisco Bay, asserting indigenous rights in a bold protest that lasted 19 months. During the 1970s, California also became a leader in the emerging environmental movement. Events like the 1969 Santa Barbara oil spill, which fouled the coast with millions of gallons of oil, and the ongoing issue of smog in Los Angeles spurred Californians to push for environmental protections. In 1970, the first Earth Day saw enthusiastic participation in California. The state enacted pioneering laws like the California Environmental Quality Act, 1970, and later vehicle emission standards that were stricter than federal ones, leading the nation in efforts to clean air and water. By embracing environmentalism, California set a model that other states and countries followed. Amid these social currents, California's economy kept surging and a new engine of growth emerged: technology. In the decades after World War II, areas of the Bay Area, especially Silicon Valley and Santa Clara Valley near San Jose, became centers of electronics and computer research. Companies like Hewlett-Packard had started in garages in the 1940s, and by the 1960s the region was booming with defense-related tech firms. In 1969, scientists at UCLA and Stanford helped develop the early ARPANET, a forerunner of the Internet. During the 1970s, Silicon Valley really took off with the birth of the personal computer industry. Intel, founded in Mountain View, invented the microprocessor, and in 1976, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak built the first Apple computers in Jobs' parents' garage in Los Altos. The high-tech boom had begun. By the 1980s, companies like Apple, Oracle, and countless startups made Silicon Valley synonymous with innovation. Hollywood, meanwhile, continued to dominate entertainment, now producing blockbuster films and television shows that were seen worldwide, further spreading images of Californian lifestyles and stories. Politically, California produced national leaders too. Former California Governor Ronald Reagan was elected U.S. President in 1980, reflecting a political shift as well. His presidency ushered in a more conservative era. Yet California itself remained a mix of political currents, progressive ideas in some areas, conservative in others, a large, diverse state that was often on the cutting edge of American politics and culture. By 1980, California's population reached 23.7 million, and the state had become a microcosm of the entire country in its diversity. No single ethnic group would hold a majority for much longer. Already one could see growing Asian American communities, a large and growing Latino population, and people from every corner of the globe making California home. In the late 1980s, California's global influence was underscored when the state hosted the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics successfully and when Hollywood's entertainment exports, from movies to music, think of the global fame of Michael Jackson or the rise of California hip-hop, permeated world culture. California was booming, but more big changes were on the horizon as it entered the 1990s and a new century. By the 1990s, California was firmly established as a leader in technology, culture, and economic might, as well as a state confronting complex challenges. In 1990, the population was nearing 30 million, and a decade later, it exceeded 33 million. Today, about 39 million people live in California, making it the most populous U.S. state by a large margin. In fact, California alone is home to 1 out of 8 Americans. This immense population is also one of the most diverse in the world. No single ethnic group forms a majority in California anymore. The state is truly a minority-majority society, with the largest group being Latinos of various national origins, about 39% of the population, followed by non-Hispanic whites, around 35%, and significant Asian American, 15%, and African American, 5% communities. Dozens of languages are spoken. It's common to hear Spanish, Chinese, Tagalog, Vietnamese, Korean, and more in daily life. This diversity is a legacy of continuous immigration and in-migration. From the gold rush to the tech boom, people have kept coming to California in search of opportunity. Economically, California is a global giant. The state's gross domestic product, GDP, is the largest of any U.S. state and, remarkably, ranks among the top economies in the world. By 2023 to 2024, California's economy had grown to nearly $4 trillion, surpassing countries like the United Kingdom and even Japan, making it roughly the 4th largest economy on the planet as of 2025. The engines driving this economy are varied. Technology and innovation, centered in Silicon Valley, where companies like Google, Apple, and Facebook have their headquarters. Entertainment, Hollywood's film, TV, and music industry in Los Angeles. Manufacturing, tourism, and agriculture, California produces a huge portion of the nation's fruits, vegetables, and nuts. California's Central Valley remains one of the world's most productive agricultural regions, while the coastal cities host cutting-edge industries and world-class universities fueling research. Of course, modern California faces significant challenges as well. The rapid growth and development have led to environmental strains. Water scarcity is a perennial issue, with frequent droughts forcing conservation and innovative responses in water management. Wildfires have become more frequent and severe in recent years, partly due to climate change and decades of fire suppression in forests. Images of large wildfires near communities in Sonoma, Paradise, Malibu, and elsewhere have become all too familiar each summer and fall. The state has responded by taking a lead in climate policy. California set ambitious goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and invest in renewable energy, often acting ahead of the federal government. The cost of living, especially housing affordability, is another big challenge. Bustling coastal cities like San Francisco, San Jose, and Los Angeles have some of the highest housing costs in the country, which has led to concerns about inequality and homelessness. Indeed, despite its enormous wealth, California grapples with homelessness crises in many urban centers, highlighting the stark contrast between rich and poor. Yet, California continues to be a land of innovation and hope. Culturally, it's constantly reinventing itself. Whether it's the latest in tech from social media to electric vehicles, new music and art scenes, or culinary trends, California's diverse population has made it a foodie paradise with influences from around the world. The state's universities and research institutions like Stanford, UC Berkeley, UCLA, Caltech remain at the forefront of new discoveries, including biotechnology and space exploration. Many private space companies are based in California. Politically, California often sets trends as well, with early adoption of policies like legalized medical and later recreational cannabis, pioneering auto emission standards, and even providing models for climate action globally. As we stand in the 2020s, California's story is still unfolding. It is a state that started as a far-off land of myth. Early Spanish explorers even imagined it to be an island of riches and legend, and became a real place of abundance and opportunity, though not without hardship and controversy. From the native peoples who first thrived on its lands, to Spanish missionaries and Mexican ranchers, to gold rush miners, railroad builders, Dust Bowl migrants, and Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, each wave of people has left its imprint. California today is a vibrant tapestry of all those influences. It remains a place where dreams are chased. Whether that dream is striking gold, making it in Hollywood, launching a tech startup, or simply seeking a better life in a mild climate with natural beauty, from its beaches and mountains to its famous redwood forests and national parks like Yosemite. The Golden State has earned its nickname in more ways than one. Looking ahead, California will undoubtedly continue to play an outsized role in shaping culture, technology, and ideas not just for the United States, but for the world. And as history has shown, Californians will face their challenges with the same spirit of innovation and resilience that has defined this land since its early days. Always moving forward, always reaching for the next horizon.